Hello, my name is Brittany McManus, and I chose to do my presentation over gender or racial messages in mass media. The first article that I read was called The Pathways of Global Cultural Diffusion, Mass Media and People's Moral Declarations About Men's Violence Against Women. The purpose of the study was to examine the impact of the exposure to mass media content, specifically anti-violence scripts, on the respondents' attitudes in Malawi. This was a quantitative and a qualitative study, so a mixed method, as it used the data to measure respondents' exposure to anti-violence scripts and to analyze the correlation between the exposure and their attitudes. The study used a convenient sampling method where the respondents were selected from those who were available at the time of the survey. The findings of this study suggested that exposure to mass media content in Malawi contained anti-violence scripts is associated with more positive gender attitudes among respondents. The study also found that exposure to television had a greater effect on respondents' gender attitudes than radio or newspaper exposure. It also suggested that television is an effective media for sharing anti-violence messages and potentially changing gender attitudes in Malawi. The next article that I read was called Social Media Marketing of Cosmetic Services in the United States, Examining Gender Disparities. The main purpose of the study was to examine potential gender disparities in social media plastic surgery marketing in America. The study was quantitative, and the sampling method used was stratified random sampling. What they did was they conducted a search on Google, Facebook, and Instagram in order to examine potential gender disparities in social media plastic surgery marketing. Each practice's Facebook and Instagram profile were analyzed in two separate fashions for the presence or the absence of advertisement for male services in the last 10 posts and the proportion of specific procedures advertised. The findings of this study show that there is a substantial disparity in the procedures most heavily marketed toward men and their actual popularity amongst the male demographic. The third article that I chose to review was called The Language of Racism and Discrimination Through the Lens of Political Communication and Online Media. This article focused on analyzing the critical language of racism and political communication reflected through online media. It also examined the elements of meaning and content structure of political statements, the context in which they are used, and the intensity of news published by media on the statements of politicians. The study used a purposive sampling method, selecting statements from high political officers in United Kingdoms in France from October 2022 to April 2023, as well as statements from earlier periods. These statements were analyzed for hostile, critical, racial, and discriminatory language. The study found that online media often perpetuates the language of racism and discrimination through political communication. This includes the use of derogatory terms and stereotypes, as well as the framing of certain groups in a negative light. The authors also highlighted the need for more awareness and responsibility among media outlets in order to combat and prevent the perpetuation of harmful language and ideals. The fourth article was titled Gender and Emotion Stereotypes in Children's Television. The purpose of the study was to examine the representations of gender and emotion stereotypes in children's television programming. The research type was a quantitative, and the sampling method used was a content analysis. The researchers used the content analysis method to examine a sample of episodes from 8 different children's TV shows, including 4 educational and 4 entertainment purposes. Shows included Dora the Explorer, Magic School Bus, Little Einsteins, Barney, SpongeBob, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, Clifford, and Curious George. These episodes were randomly selected from the most popular children's TV shows airing in the United States during that time. The findings of the study suggested that males outnumbered females in children's programming and that emotion stereotypes are still evident in both educational and entertainment programming. Specifically, males were seen to demonstrate more anger and females more sad and fear. However, the study also supported only the first hypothesis that males would outnumber females in children's programming. Similar to previous research, it was found that males outnumber females in almost all of the shows examined. This suggested that gender-based representation remains relevant in this area. The findings suggested that there may be an increase in representation of females in children's programming. The gender imbalance is still significant, though. The fifth article reviewed was I Don't Know How You Get Past That, Racism and Stereotyping in College Football Recruiting Media. The purpose of the study was to examine the ways in which racism and stereotyping are portrayed in media coverage of college football recruiting. The study was qualitative, using a purposive sampling method. The method is often used in qualitative research to ensure that participants have relevant knowledge and experiences related to the research question. It allows for targeted and focused sample rather than a random selection. They picked this because the reporter specifically based on experience in the industry is what they needed. The study found that some participants believed racism no longer exists in the sports media, but other reporters were aware of the racial stereotypes and felt a need to address racial inequity. This presents an opportunity for anti-racist training to help media members avoid stereotyping and address racism in their work. The final article that I read was African American Women's Representation on Television. The purpose of the study was to explore the stereotypes of African American women television characters. This was examined through a qualitative study using a meta-analysis method which involved analyzing and synthesizing data from multiple studies on the topic to draw conclusions about African American women on television. The findings of the study revealed that while there has been an increase in representation of African American women on television, there is still a lack of diverse and authentic portrayals in media. To reflect on this presentation, media has come a long way and there are differences that were recognized through the articles on media. There are still changes that need to be made when it comes to gender and racial messages in mass media. Some of these changes range from making sure that emotions are being portrayed through male and female characters on television and children's TV and in regular TV, making sure that African American women are being authentic and getting to show their true selves and their roles that they're playing on TV, making sure that racism is being eliminated from sports, making sure that male and female both get the same kind of opportunities when it comes to different surgeries, including plastic surgery, and the list goes on. Within the 6 articles that I did read, I was able to review studies that were quantitative, qualitative, and mixed with both. Thank you guys for listening today, and here is a list of the references, including our textbook.